14 minutes. That's how long you get to be the most powerful person on earth. 14 minutes of absolute authority over an empire stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the borders of Persia. 14 minutes where your word is law, your command is divine, your life is sacred. Minute 1. They place the crown on your head, and you almost fall over from the weight. Someone, you don't know who, steadies you from behind. Their hands are shaking. Why are their hands shaking? Minute 4. Your father's body is still warm 3 rooms away. They haven't even covered his face yet, but you're not allowed to see him. Emperors don't cry, someone tells you, but you're 6 and you don't understand why not. Minute 8. You ask for your mother. The soldiers exchange glances. That's when you first feel it, the cold realization that something is very, very wrong. Minute 14. The doors burst open. The Praetorian Guard doesn't even try to make it look like an accident. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. What you're about to hear isn't just the tragic death of a child. This is the story of one of the Roman Empire's most chaotic, bloodiest, most desperate periods. The year historians call the Year of the Six Emperors, 238 AD. 6 different men sat on the Roman throne in 12 months, and all 6 died. Think about that number. 6 emperors in 1 year, a new ruler every 2 months, each more desperate than the last, each more paranoid than the last, each shorter-lived than the last. Rome was eating itself alive and no one could stop it. But to understand how this happened, we need to go back. The trouble started with Maximinus Thrax. Emperor Maximinus was a career soldier, rough, brutal, illiterate, but undeniably brilliant on the battlefield. When he took the throne in 235 AD, he hated the Senate. He saw them as city rabbits, aristocrats living soft in their palaces, never spilling blood, never understanding what real Rome was about. Maximinus never even visited Rome. For 3 years he remained emperor and never set foot in the capital. Instead, he stayed on the northern frontiers with his armies, fighting barbarians and growing increasingly paranoid about extorting ransoms from his commanders. The Senate despised this. This new emperor threatened their power, their privileges, their wealth. But worse, he looked down on them. For senators, being humiliated by an illiterate soldier was intolerable. In Africa, there was a governor named Gordian, a man in his 70s. Wealthy, cultured, from a senatorial family, everything Maximinus was not. The people loved him as governor. He was kind, generous, a fair administrator. In March of 238 AD, a group of civilian rebels in Carthage burst into Gordian's home and proclaimed him emperor. Gordian didn't want it. He was 79 years old, dreaming of retirement. But the rebels insisted. Either he would accept, or he couldn't protect his family. Finally, he said he would accept if his son could rule beside him. Young Gordian was 46 and just as reluctant as his father. But what could they do? The rebellion had already begun. Gordian I and Gordian II declared themselves co-emperors. The Senate, so tired of Maximinus's tyranny, immediately supported these 2 men. Finally, someone not from the military, cultured, noble. There were just 2 of them, and they had no military power. But hope was enough. It lasted 22 days, just 22 days. A governor loyal to Maximinus Capellianus marched on Africa with a large army. Gordian II went out to command the army because someone had to, and his father was too old. A middle-aged intellectual with no combat experience went to war against some of Rome's hardest soldiers. The slaughter lasted a few hours. Gordian II's army was torn apart. He died on the battlefield, either from a spear or, as some sources claim, by suicide rather than capture. When news reached Carthage, old Gordian I collapsed. With his 46-year-old son's body rotting in the fields outside the city, the 79-year-old father knew what was right. Maximinus would come for revenge. And he wouldn't just kill the Gordians, he would kill their families, their supporters, everyone who said they supported them. The old emperor went to his own palace and hanged himself. His empire had lasted 22 days, but the Senate couldn't go back now. They had supported the Gordians. Maximinus wouldn't forgive them. So they did something unprecedented since the Republic. They selected 6 men, called them the Vigintiviri, the Council of 20. And from among them, they chose 2 men to rule together as emperor, Pupienus and Balbinus. Both were senators, both were old, both hated each other, but together they had to stand against Maximinus. And then they realized something. The people didn't love them. The streets of Rome erupted. People saw elitist, self-appointed dictators. They had loved the Gordian family. Who were these new men? In panic, Pupienus and Balbinus found a child, the grandson of Gordian I's daughter, the last male heir of the family. His name was Gordian III, and he was 6 years old, not even 13, not even 8, 6 years old, a child who hadn't yet learned to read properly. Pupienus and Balbinus proclaimed him Caesar, heir to the emperor. It was a political move, to calm the people, to use the authority of the Gordian name to give the Senate legitimacy. No one thought little Gordian would have real power. He was a symbol, a puppet, a living family crest. But here's the thing. A 6-year-old child didn't understand that. We know very little about Gordian III's first 6 years of life. He grew up in a wealthy family, no doubt, raised in a palace by servants and teachers. Maybe his mother was there. Maybe not. Ancient sources are silent. What we know is that in March of 238 AD, his life changed forever. His grandfather and great-uncle died. Pupienus and Balbinus took the throne. And then one day, perhaps a day that started perfectly normally, adults dressed him in special clothes and took him to the Circus Maximus to show him to the people. Thousands cheered. They shouted his name. Gordian! 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 He didn't understand. How could he? He was 6 years old. Pupienus and Balbinus gave him the title of Caesar. They gave him special rooms in the palace. They assigned him teachers and guards. But they didn't give him real power. He was a mascot, a living, breathing piece of propaganda. Little Gordian lived in this role for a while. How many months? Maybe 3, maybe 4. Did he notice the adults' worried looks, the whispers, the arguments behind closed doors? Probably. Children always understand more than adults say. Pupienus and Balbinus never had a chance. They hated each other. The people didn't love them. And most importantly, the Praetorian Guard, the elite protectors of the emperor, despised them. The Praetorian Guard held a special place in Roman politics. They weren't just the emperor's bodyguards. They were kingmakers. As long as an emperor lived, the Praetorians protected him. But if an emperor became weak, unpopular, or threatening, the Praetorians removed him and chose a new one. In July of 238 AD, Pupienus and Balbinus, living in separate palaces, received news that Maximinus had been killed on the northern frontier. It was good news. The threat was gone. Now they were safe. But they weren't. The Praetorian Guard dragged both of them from their homes one night, dragged them from inside the palace to the streets. The people watched. No one helped. The guards systematically beat the two emperors, broke their fingers, gouged out their eyes, and finally threw them into the Tiber River. In 8 months, 6 emperors had died. Gordian I, suicide. Gordian II, killed in battle. Maximinus, killed by his own soldiers. Pupienus, tortured to death by Praetorians. Balbinus, tortured to death by Praetorians. And now there was a problem. There was no emperor. The Praetorian Guard needed something immediately. The people were rioting. The Senate was decimated. The army was scattered on the northern frontier. And there was no legal emperor in Rome. Then someone remembered. The child, Gordian's grandson, the 6-year-old boy, still in the palace, still holding the title of Caesar, still alive. It's difficult to reconstruct what happened in those 14 minutes because no ancient source kept minute-by-minute records. But we know the general outline, and what we know is heartbreaking. Praetorian commanders took 6-year-old Gordian from his quarters. Without saying anything, no explanation, no warning, they took him to the throne room. They placed him before the Senate and proclaimed him Imperator Augustus, Emperor of Rome, 6 years old. The imperial ceremony happened right there. They placed the laurel crown on his head. It was too big, almost falling off. They dressed him in purple toga. It dragged on the floor. They put the scepter and orb in his hands. He couldn't lift them. What did the child feel? Fear, confusion, excitement? Did he understand nothing at all? Maybe he felt proud. Maybe he thought, finally I did something right. Maybe he thought, finally the adults are paying attention to me. Maybe he thought, this is a game, a special game. Senate members, the survivors, knelt. Praetorian guards saluted. Palace officials bowed, and then reality began. He didn't understand what being emperor meant, but the adults around him understood. And what they understood was this: this child was a symbol, not a real ruler, a tool, and tools can be broken. An argument started. In the room, with the child right there. Senators argued that the child was too young. They needed to establish a regency. Some claimed certain senators were using the child to seize power. The Praetorian Guard listened and decided. We can't know this with certainty because ancient sources conflict. But the prevailing narrative is this: the Praetorians decided this child would become another faction of the empire, another problem. The Gordian name was useful, but the actual child? The child was optional. 14 minutes, the time from his proclamation as emperor to his murder. The doors opened. Guards entered. Different guards, not the ceremonial ones. Heavily armored, heavily armed guards. Everyone in the room knew what was happening. Senators pulled back. No one intervened. No one objected. No one stepped forward to protect the 6-year-old emperor. What did the child do? Did he cry? Did he try to run? Did he call for his mother? We don't know. The records are silent. What we know, he died. Immediately, efficiently. The Praetorians created no disturbance. They just solved a problem. 6-year-old Gordian III, Emperor of Rome, after ruling for 14 minutes, was killed by the same men who made him emperor. And then, something happened that no one expected. The people learned. The streets of Rome exploded. At some point in 1,000 years of history, the Roman people said, enough. 6 emperors had died. None had died of old age. The empire had become a slaughterhouse. But killing a child, killing a 6-year-old child, this had gone too far. Riots broke out. Buildings were set on fire. Praetorian guards were attacked. For the first time, Rome's elite soldiers sought refuge in the streets of their own city. The Senate convened in panic. They had to do something, immediately. They found another Gordian, another grandson. This time he was 13, still very young, but at least not 6. And they did one of the strangest things in Roman history. They erased the first Gordian III from history. Official records said the 13-year-old was the original and the 6-year-old had never existed. They destroyed his coins. They smashed his statues. They rewrote the records. The 13-year-old Gordian III ruled for 6 years, surprisingly long for a child emperor, actually. He died at 19, probably killed by his own general. But at least he got 6 years. At least he reached adolescence. At least he had a chance. The 6-year-old Gordian got 14 minutes. For 2,000 years, historians debated which was real. Was there one Gordian III or two? Did the 6-year-old really exist? That child-sized throne in 1947 proved it. He had existed. He had ruled for 14 minutes, and he had been forgotten. Why should we care why a 6-year-old child was killed 2,000 years ago? Because this story isn't just about Romans. It's about power, and how power consumes children. Throughout history, children have been pawns in adult wars, placed on thrones, sent to battles, forced into marriages, left to die so adults could solve unsolvable political problems. Gordian III wasn't exceptional. He was a pattern. Think of Emperor Romulus Augustus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire. He was 16, a puppet, deposed a year later and forgotten by history. Think of the young English kings. Edward V became king at 12. 3 months later, his uncle imprisoned him in the Tower of London, and he was never seen again. Think of the baby emperors controlled by empress dowagers in China. Children sat on thrones, obeyed rules, read their speeches while adults made the real decisions behind them. In modern times, child soldiers, child brides, child laborers. Children sent to mines to feed adult economies. Children holding rifles to fight adult wars. Children married to meet adult arrangements. Tools, symbols, pawns. Gordian III lasted 14 minutes because he was no longer useful. It's that simple. A 6-year-old child was valuable as a cog in the imperial machine, and when the machine consumed him, it discarded him. Rome saw itself as civilized. The Republic, laws, the Senate, these were things that separated them from barbarian tribes. But when a crisis came, all civilization was set aside, and a 6-year-old child became a problem in the adult solution. What does this tell us? What does it say about history? What does it say about humanity? Perhaps the most disturbing truth is this: nothing has changed. Today, children are still pawns in adult worlds, in different ways, in less obvious ways. But tools are still tools. Children are used in political propaganda, in photo ops, in campaigns, useful as symbols but never as heard voices. Children are used in economic machines, cheap labor, consumer targets, generations saving to pay future debts. Children are used in social media algorithms, content, influencers, people marketed to audiences, first then monetized for them. Gordian III's crown was too heavy. But are the burdens we place on today's children any less heavy? They just look different. The archaeologists who discovered that child-sized throne in 1947 found something else. Next to the throne, carved into the wall, a small inscription in Latin, Puer imperator lacrimavit. The child emperor cried. Someone had recorded it. Maybe an official, maybe a servant, maybe a guard having a conscientious moment. For 14 minutes, a 6-year-old child was the most powerful person in the world. And he cried. Because power is an illusion, especially for children. Adults give children crowns, titles, dress them in special clothes. But real power, the power to make choices, to say no, to control one's own fate, is never given. Gordian III didn't choose his fate, didn't choose his service, didn't choose his death. Adults chose these. Adults saw him as useful, then saw him as dangerous, then threw him away. 2,000 years later, his throne sits in a museum. Tourists pass by, read, shake their heads, move on. A historical curiosity, a shameful story, a lesson from the past. But was the lesson learned? Somewhere in the world, right now, a child is being used for adult purposes, maybe in politics, maybe in war, maybe in economics, maybe in family. And one day, when that child is no longer useful, what will happen? History repeats itself. Children still cry. Only their crowns look different. Gordian III lasted 14 minutes. But his story has continued for 2,000 years. And it will continue. Until we as adults understand this, giving a child a crown is not giving power. It's an obligation to protect. And when we fail to provide that protection, like Gordian III, we lose a generation in 14 minutes. The 6-year-old emperor died 2,000 years ago. But every day, somewhere, another child sits on a throne designed by adults. And here's the clock ticking. 14 minutes. 13, 12.